2023 budget is yet to be passed, but we are already facing challenges for its execution and performance. The federal government may present a supplementary budget to the National Assembly due to further depreciation of the Naira and rising inflation that have made the 2023 budget nearly unrealistic. The benchmarks of 435 Naira to a dollar, an inflation rate of 17.10%. The severe scarcity of dollars means that the local currency may head for 500 Naira to a dollar in the NAFEX market and up to 1,000 Naira to a dollar in the parallel market in 2023. But the National Assembly is built to go ahead with consideration and passage of the budget as proposed in the appropriation bill laid before it by the President, Muhammadu Buhari, despite the major difference in the exchange rates. Gentlemen, with the economic situation in the country, how realistic is this budget?
No, that's why it's actually called a budget. It's just a framework with which we intend to finance activity in the next year. So for us to think that at the end of the day, whatever is passed by the National Assembly will be absolutely realistic is a child's play. That's not possible. The situation, you have inflation, the issue of exchange rate, rising dollar, deepening Naira and all that. I am sure the lawmakers, as well as the federal government, will have taken all this into consideration in packaging this budget. It's a fiscal document. It's a proposal that all things being equal, that's the word, we'll do it this way. Okay. So obviously, if all things are not equal, we'll have to do adjustments where necessary. And that's where the Constitution allows for other instruments to be procured using the same National Assembly to, pad this should problem arise later. But taking Nigeria and Nigerians into consideration as it is today, National Assembly must look at that budget holistically. Everything that will increase our foreign spendings should be reduced to the barest minimum. That's how we can save the Naira. If whatever it is we have to bring in again, whatever it is we have to spend foreign exchange on, should be pruned. The budget should be such that encourages production, that encourages exports, so that we can help the Naira gather some strength. The problem we usually have, we've been told locally, we've been told internationally, is that we are buying more than we are selling. And when you buy more than you are selling, you cannot expect your currency to be strong. That's the rebate. And then, Nigerians are daily gathering our own money and paying it to the embassies of foreign countries in the process of Japa. We are yet to understand the impact of this on our economy. Because what is happening is the fact that people no longer travel abroad with peanuts. People sell their houses, sell their cars, borrow money, defraud people. A young man recently traveled to Canada, and it was discovered that he started a contribution scheme with 20 people, 100,000 Naira every month. And in those 20 months, nobody collected. He was just gathering the money, and he made away with almost 4 million Naira. So you can understand the impact of all this on our economy. So the budget, yes, is laid before the National Assembly. They should look at it holistically and see what they can do to ensure that the final product is something that will help our situation.
All right, Adewale, let me have your take on that.
Yeah, I think the supplementary budget is normal. I think so that the medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy of the government. However, the budget was based on $435, which I think was a very wrong assumption. because you have the Russia-Ukraine war, then you have this new Naira design. So that is not realistic. Even now we are talking about almost 900. Naira is going to about 900. And people are speculating that it might even hit the 1,000 benchmark before the end of the year. So we need a realistic budget. And also a budget that will take into consideration something that addresses the essential of life, which is agriculture. This flooding has affected a lot of farmers. We are not going to feel the impact now until next year. People's farms have been washed away. So we need to, this budget should take into consideration how we are going to deal with small-scale farmers so that they can replenish what they have lost, and also to be able to, to meet the planting season, so that next year there's not going to be food scarcity.
All right, thank you. Now, gentlemen, joining us for more insight on this is the CEO of Carry Asset Management Company, Johnson Chukwu. Thank you for joining us, sir. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
All right. I'm sure you must have been listening to our conversation. Now, let me ask you, what part of the 2023 budget is unrealistic for us to now need a supplementary budget?
Yeah.
All right, we seem to have difficulty in hearing him. All right, so let's go on with our conversation.
The 2023 budget, and we're talking of a supplementary budget. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you, Mr. Chukwu. Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, I was saying that, interestingly, if you look at the 2023 proposed budget, which has not been passed into law, I think the first thing should have been for the government to withdraw that budget and adjust it and represent it. We shouldn't be talking of supplementary budget when the initial annual budget has not been passed into law. It's only when that has been supplementary budget. So for me, that is building, we're trying to build on what does not exist. You cannot supplement what does not exist. So first thing first, if the government feels that the budget projections are no longer realistic, they should withdraw it and present another budget to the National Assembly for 2023. Having said that, if you look at the premise on which the government is even putting the idea of a supplementary budget or amendment to the budget, they are talking of inflation rate and they're talking of depreciation of Naira. In fact, actually devaluation of Naira, because if you look at what has happened, it's actually devaluation. And what that means is that the government is looking at the projected expenditure will no longer be sufficient. But the government is not looking at the projected revenue. When you're talking of you want to present another budget, a supplementary budget, like I said, we shouldn't be talking of supplementary. But let's even assume we follow their trend of thought, and we're talking of a supplementary budget. So what we should be talking of is this. What, like you asked, what do they want to supplement? Are we saying the 20.5 trillion Naira will no longer be enough as a result of depreciation of the local currency and as a result of inflation, which is possible because some of the components of the 20.5 trillion Naira are dollar denominated, and we are converted to Naira at a particular rate. Two, inflation would have made it difficult for you to achieve the same prices for the items that we have provided in the budget. So the price of those things would have gone up, and therefore you require additional funding to buy them. But the converse of it is that is the government also looking at how do we increase the revenue? And the starting point is, I'm happy that one of my colleagues there had mentioned that the budget is premised on 435 Naira to $1. The first thing we should be looking at that if we are saying that Naira has depreciated since the budget was submitted, the proposal was submitted. Why don't we? It's my position that we should harmonize the exchange rate to a single exchange rate. But why don't we even adjust the official rate to maybe 500 Naira? If you adjust the official rate to 500 Naira, the government projected revenue will be more than the same 9.7 trillion budgeted. So in that case, you're going to see an increase in revenue and as well as increase in expenditure. So the first thing is the government should also consider adjusting the exchange rate at which it converts dollar earnings into Naira, such that we're not just talking about a ballooning of budget deficit and increase in borrowing, We're also talking of a narrowing, I mean, an improvement in the revenue based on the fact that we're going to exchange our dollar earnings at a higher exchange rate.
All right.
So I think those should be the conversations.
All
But
right.
first thing first, let the government, if they feel the projections are no longer realistic, pull it back and then amend it.
Okay.
And the key thing is that we must adjust the assumption on the exchange rate, which is no longer realistic.
All right, so let's discuss the impact of currency appreciation and depreciation on inflation. What is the bottom line?
You know, when the currency depreciates, what happens is that every component of item that is imported into the country, into your country, will be exchanged at the higher local currency rate, which means that the landing cost of goods imported into the country will go up, will increase. And that also means that the inflation rate will increase. Well, that means that if, for instance, you have an exchange rate of, for convenience sake, let's say $500, $500 to $1, and you have an item that costs $100, it then means that that item on landing here is about 5,000 Naira. So, but if the exchange rate moves to, for instance, 75 Naira, it will no longer be 5,000 Naira. You're talking of something like 7,500 Naira. And that is where the challenge is. So you are in any case, single item that used to cost you 5,000 Naira will now cost you 7,500 Naira. That differential is an increase in the rate of inflation. It's a reflection of an increase will be used, calculate the new inflation rate. So when your currency depreciates, every item you import into your country will land at a higher cost. And that higher cost will be transmitted straight. The pass-through effect will reflect on your inflation because people are going to buy those goods at a higher Naira value. That's one of the things that happen when your currency is depreciating. Converse is also the case when your currency is appreciating. It could lead to what you call deflation. A deflation will be that prices of import goods in your local economy will reduce because if your currency strengthens, the same value you import will have a lower Naira value. And therefore, you will be exchanging fewer Naira for buying that item or that commodity, which means you have a deflation. And so in any case, if you have an increase in your exchange rate, it will have a pass-through effect on inflation. It will lead to a high inflation. If you have a decline in your exchange rate, if you have an appreciation of local currency, it also has a positive impact on inflation because inflation rate will come down.
All right, so it's worrisome to ask that if the budget is preceded by an economic plan, which is the medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper, why is this volatility not envisaged?
Well, I think the volatility we've seen the past 2 weeks could have been envisaged. In the first place, there was no inkling that Naira will be redesigned. Of course, that also means that nobody could have projected that the volume of Naira in the homes of politically exposed persons that will be pursuing the few available dollar will materialize. So you've seen a sudden change in the exchange. We've seen a devaluation of the exchange rate at the parallel market rate or by more than 30%, 20% in the past 2 weeks. So nobody could have projected that. There are certain things that one would have reasonably assumed. The issue of exchange rate at 435 Naira to $1, which does not obtain other than the government window. Even the government window has gone to about 440 Naira to $1. So that could have been envisaged. I mean, the authors of the medium-term expenditure framework and the budget could have also pushed for a higher exchange rate, given that we know the currency is continuing to come under pressure because we're not in enough foreign exchange, we're not selling enough crude. And if you're not earning enough foreign exchange, it simply means your local currency will come and continue to be under pressure. So one could have reasonably projected that the exchange rate will depreciate further the currency by next year and could have maybe budgeted for maybe 450 or maybe 500 Naira to $1. That one can foresee. The other assumptions on crude production, I would say what government is doing now, hopefully, if it bears fruit, we should be able to achieve our budgeted crude production. If the Trans-Niger pipeline is coming back to operation, and then the Trans-Forcado line is also coming, I mean, we're going to start producing again. So we should be able to meet our projected volume of crude production, which will have a positive impact on our foreign exchange and our foreign reserve. But on the exchange rate, I think they could have foreseen that. But calling what has happened in the past 2 weeks, unless if anybody had a crystal ball to see that the central bank was planning to redesign the Naira, and nobody could have projected that in the medium-term expenditure framework or the budget projections or assumptions.
Yeah. What did you think should be the solution to raising revenue to meet, the context of this budget?
If you look at the government revenue, you realize that about 80% of federal government revenue come from, okay, now it's no longer at that much. The government revenues, the major government revenues are earnings from crude oil sales, taxation, and then other independent sources. Then if you consider the fact that earnings from crude oil, which one we're discussing, unless we have a stability in crude production, we may not be able to attain our projections for earnings from crude. Then, in terms of tax, non-tax revenue, the government has been doing quite well. The likes of NEMASA, the likes of NPA, and other government agencies have been doing quite well. So you may be able to achieve that projection. But the problem is that overall, we are projecting to earn about 9.7 trillion Naira. And we are projecting an expenditure of 20.5 trillion. So even if you achieve your budgeted projections, you are still going to deal with a huge budget deficit. But like I said, the budgeted projection may not be fully attained because unless crude oil production improves, if that doesn't improve, you may attain the other two components, which is tax revenue and earnings from independent sources, but you may not achieve your earnings from oil revenue. So that could lead to a shortfall in overall revenue. But in any case, what should we do now at this point in time is what we're trying to do now, improve crude oil production. That has been the major challenge we've had in the last couple of years. If we improve crude oil production, we may be able to attain our projected revenue. But even when you attain the projected revenue, you still have a huge deficit, which is of concern to anybody who is looking at fiscal condition.
Yeah, well, you spoke about the possibility of the budget being withdrawn and represented by the federal government. Are you of the opinion that there is still enough time to do this, given the desire of the present administration to ensure that budgets are ready, say January to December? I think time is still on the government side to do this.
What we have to recognize is that there's no point in passing a law that is unimplementable. What the government is saying by mooting the idea of a supplementary budget is to say that the current budget projections are no longer realistic, and therefore the estimates are unimplementable. So we have, this is the first week of, we're going into the second week of November. So we still have, on average, about 6 weeks before the end of this year. And if the history of the National Assembly is anything to go by, they've been very, very swift in approving the federal government budget. Sometimes they could actually extend their holidays, sit longer hours to approve the budget. They are obviously in love with ensuring that the budget is approved on time. So if the Minister of Finance decides to withdraw that budget or send a fresh budget, if they already know the figures they want to adjust or they want to include in the supplementary budget, they can as well adjust those figures in the existing estimates and send it back to the National Assembly without the one they have sent earlier. Let the President write and send the new estimates to the National Assembly. I guess the National Assembly has not done so much work on the existing estimates. They will send it to their committees, and within a matter of days, the committees will do their work, and it will be tabled before the two Houses of Assembly. And at the joint session, they will approve the budget and send back to the President for signing. I don't think it's late if the government knows what they want to adjust, and they are willing to do that quickly.
All right, so economic experts have said the success of the 20.51 trillion 2023 budget depends on extensive fiscal and monetary measures to address the wide gap between Nigeria's declining revenue and productivity levels. I would like to know, are you on the same page with them on this?
What they obviously said is that the government needs to do something to cut down on the deficit. As we speak today, there is nothing in that estimate that shows how the government will cut on the budget deficit other than the government will borrow. And if you look at our national debt, about 42 trillion naira, and the government is planning to borrow almost an average of another 10 trillion naira. Because if you look at what they want to borrow from the local market and international market, and from the local market about 8.8 trillion, and want to borrow about 1.77 trillion from bilateral and multilateral agencies. You are talking of borrowing another 10 trillion. If you add it to what we have today, you'll be talking about 52 trillion naira. So the concerns are that we're building a debt profile that may be difficult to service. So if the government wants to cut down on its deficit, then we should be talking of how do we fund infrastructure? There's a provision about 5.35 trillion naira for capital expenditure. I think 5.45 trillion naira for capital expenditure. And as it stands today, every kobo of that capital expenditure we borrowed. And the government is not known to be the best extractor of value for money. I mean, they don't seem to have the capacity to extract the best value or the most optimal value for the money they spend. So if we are really going to borrow that money from the private sector, why don't you concession those assets or those projects to the private sector who could actually execute them at a much cheaper cost, at a more efficient rate, and then save the national economy from the burden of debt service, part of which to service debt borrowed for inefficiencies in government procurement process. So that's one of the concerns you should have. Why can't the government look at reducing or concessioning some of the infrastructure, particularly those that are commercially viable, and reduce the amount of 5.35 or 5.45 trillion we're going to borrow to fund capital expenditure? The other aspect is that we have made provision of about 3.6 trillion naira as a subsidy for petroleum products in the first 6 months of next year. Given that you're talking about a budget deficit of more than 10 trillion naira, must we willingly blindfold ourselves and incur 3.6 trillion naira? Since it's still futuristic, why wouldn't the government have the courage and political will to address the issue of subsidy this year, before the end of this year, and they eliminate that 3.6 trillion naira? If you look at those two figures I've mentioned to you, you're already talking of something in the neighborhood of 9 trillion naira, which will, to some extent, cut down on the deficit we have. So that's what we're saying. Are we taking measures as it stands today to cut down the deficit? And I think the answer is no. The government is kicking the ball forward, hoping that the next government will pick it up, because otherwise it would address the issue of subsidy now instead of saying the next government should address it from July.
All right. On a final note, now let me have your take on CBN's Naira redesign policy.
Well, interestingly, I support the policy because it seems that one of the primary objectives that has enunciated by the CBN governor will be achieved or is being achieved, which is to frustrate the use of Naira for criminal activities. I can't remember of hearing of any major kidnapping in the past couple of days since the announcement was made, because even the kidnappers know they will find it difficult to clean the funds if they receive those funds. By the time they receive the funds, it becomes ordinary people to them if they go ahead to kidnap. But most importantly, it looks like it will have a very positive impact on issue of vote buying in the next election, which will help us clean up our political process. Because as it stands today, information at my disposal indicates that a lot of politically exposed persons are trying to find ways to lodge the monies they have withdrawn over a long period of time in preparation for the election, lodge them back into the banking system. So if they do that, and given that this new policy becomes effective on 31st of January, it will be difficult for them to withdraw enough to prosecute the election that will be coming up in February and March.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson Chukwu, CEO, Carry Asset Management Company. Thank you very much for joining us on Journalist Hangouts this afternoon. We should let you go now. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, gentlemen. From experts, from concerned Nigerians, we've heard severally that we need to cut the cost of governance.
That's just it. That is
Absolutely.
Just it. There's no two way to it. We need to cut costs. We need to reduce our extravagance in government, out of government. While we continue to tell those in government to cut costs, we must also tell high-flying Nigerians to help the country by reducing their extravagance. Because the more we bring in luxury goods, the more our Naira is weakened. At a time like this, all hands must be on deck. We all must be willing to make sacrifices. You hear some things in the last 1-2 weeks, and you begin to wonder, these persons or person, are they not part of Nigeria? They will dole out so much cash for something that is foreign, for something that is not sourced locally. The effect of such billions of Naira that had to be converted to probably dollar to get these things done, it is, sinking us deeper into inflation as a country. So while it is important to talk to those in government to cut costs, to get more realistic, and live according to today's situation, we should also tell the individuals out there that you need to help the country.
All right.
We know you have the money, but spend it in a way that it will not further disgrace the Naira.
All right, Mr. Adewale, in 30 seconds, your final take on this.
Reduction of cost on governance is also for our own security. When you are talking about violence, when you are talking about terrorism and all that, if people in government can reduce the cost, that can be, we can plug that into production and job creation. And I think to a large extent, it will make us to be more secure.
All right.